Ora è il momento di uno speaker delle Nazioni Unite. C'è un momento di panico, non so cosa è successo. Va bene, tutto a posto. Il suo nome è Tobias Kettner, sostituisce Ana Moreno, che non è potuta essere con noi, sfortunatamente. Ma Tobias ha tante cose da raccontarci. La sua esperienza con le Nazioni Unite comincia a Nairobi, è stato lì per diversi anni, ora è trasferito in Europa, a Bruxelles, e il suo compito si occupa di comunicazione. Ecco a voi Tobias, grazie.
Avanti così. Okay, perfect. Okay, thanks a lot, Totti, and welcome everybody, and thanks a lot for that nice introduction. As Totti said, I was based in Nairobi, and we set up the whole process towards Habitat 3, which is a process which also kind of brought forward the urban thinkers campuses where we are gathering today. We knew we had to get sort of the different regions of the world engaged, and that was the reason why I moved to Europe, why I moved to Brussels, in order to kind of get Europe, European governments, European stakeholders, European municipalities on board. Why is the UN talking about cities? Like, why is that a topic for the UN? When there was the first UN conference on urban situations, on urbanization in '76 in Vancouver, the world was not as urbanized as today. Like, we had only 37% of the worldwide population that lived in cities. While now we already have over half of the population worldwide that lives in cities, and we do have the prediction that by 2050, over 2/3 of the population worldwide will live in cities. That's a massive change sort of in the history of humanity, with a massive sort of impact on the way we think, the way we live, the way our economy is structured. That is sort of a process that is taking place, and we need to be aware and kind of find the right strategy to deal with it. Now, if you look at cities, cities occupy only 2% of the land worldwide, but they're responsible for over 70% of the economy, like over 70% of the GDP, and they're also responsible for over 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions. And that's the reason why the UN is sort of putting cities into the center of a lot of things. I want to quickly draw the connection to two major UN frameworks that were developed or kind of agreed on in the last 2 years. And the one is the Agenda 2030 that Totti also mentioned before. That's basically the plan how the world wants to go towards a sustainable development, towards a development that reaches everybody and gets the world out of poverty. If you look at this Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals, there is not only an own dedicated goal on cities, that's goal number 11, but cities are also a cross-cutting issue through sort of most of the other goals. Because it's very clear that sort of if we want to win the battle for sustainable development, we have to go to cities. Like, that battle is going to be won or lost in cities. The other major UN agreement in the last years was the Paris Agreement on climate change, that you all know very well. And that is sort of also the one where most media attention is focused on. And if you remember what I said about sort of the greenhouse gas emissions, 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions that are taking place in cities, it is very clear if we want to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement, we need to find a strategy for cities worldwide to develop in a sustainable way. And that was the background why the UN met in October 2016 in Quito to develop a new urban agenda, as the outcome document of Habitat 3 is called. You saw that picture already before, Totti also used it. It's a very nice picture. And that is the former UN Secretary General and the head of UN Habitat and the Minister of Ecuador. I don't want to bore you too much with sort of a UN conference report, but I want to highlight mainly one thing. When we set up the whole process towards Habitat 3, those processes in the UN take a long time. Like, we had 2 years of preparation globally towards that conference. And the Urban Thinkers Campus that Toti mentioned before and also the meeting today, they were both in the framework of that preparatory process. When we set up that process, it was very clear Habitat 3 needs to be a very inclusive conference. It needs to be a conference where local governments, mayors, regional governments play a strong role. And I think we succeeded. We had over 2,000 local government representatives in Quito, and we had the UN conference with the highest participation of civil society and stakeholders worldwide. And sort of the meeting today here is also in that framework. So I'm super happy to be here. You can download the document. What was new in that new urban agenda? Also here, I just want to pick one key point. Urbanization in history was mainly seen as sort of an outcome, as an end product. Like usually you had sort of the narrative, a country was developing itself, there was the industrialization of a country, the Industrial Revolution in Europe, and that's the outcome at the end, like people moved into cities because there were jobs, and then somehow there was a big city with a big mess that you had to sort out. And one of the key aspects in the new urban agenda is that cities are not seen anymore as a negative thing, but they're seen as a very effective tool if they are planned and managed properly for a sustainable development. Like cities can be an endogenous source of development. And that was a very new narrative that was kind of transferred in Quito. Also, Toti, you had a nice picture of the tower in the park. If you remember in Toti's presentation, there were these towers from Le Corbusier, the famous architect who was mainly responsible for the Charta of Athens. This Charta of Athens is very old, like it's from the 30s, but it still very much defines the way how cities are even today planned. Residential here, business district there, the area where you have your sports and recreation facilities over there, with that very strict zoning. And this sort of idea how we plan our cities is long overdue. And if you look at the new urban agenda, the idea of urban planning, of the hardware that is set in the city, is much more open. It's a porous city, where the urban planner is not defining all the functionalities, but where the urban planner is sort of setting a certain standard, and then it's up to the citizens to bring life, to bring different functions to that city. How can a country structure and set up itself? Now, I thought if you're already bored by some UN bureaucrat telling you something about urbanization, I felt inspired to draft something. We have 5 pillars that we say are happening in the new urban agenda. The first pillar, if you look in it, is municipal finance. Like cities need financial instruments. Cities need to be able to collect taxes or have enough financial resources to actually implement the things that they need to implement. So municipal finance is the first pillar. Then we have the second pillar. That is urban planning and design, what I just talked about. Then we have the third pillar, which is rules and regulations. Countries need to have proper rules that guide the process towards urbanization. And a very important point to overlook that all, and now you see what is growing as had, is national urban policies. And that's a very, very hard political discussion in a lot of countries. Like countries need to know how they structure themselves, which level of government is allowed to take which decision, how much autonomy do municipalities have, what kind of freedom to take decisions do municipalities have. And our last sort of pillar to give stability to that animal is the local implementation. 90% of what is written in the new urban agenda will be implemented on a local level. Those were the 5 pillars. Now, coming to an end and also kind of creating the bridge again to the Urban Thinkers Campus here today. we have a good document that is kind of creating a narrative on cities that can guide urbanization. We need to implement it. The government of Italy has produced a national report, and governments worldwide are working now on the implementation, like on implementation frameworks. It was actually, by the way, the mayor of Palermo, on behalf of the Association of Municipalities in Italy, who presented that national report in Rome about a year ago. So we do have national and local implementations, and we have a vast range of stakeholders, like we're meeting here today, who are working on ideas to implement the new urban agenda. I want to highlight, as there are many people who are working on urban issues in their cities, there's a voluntary online platform that is called the Quito Implementation Plan. So if you have a good project on your city, you can upload that on the Quito Implementation Plan platform and find other people who are doing maybe similar things. Find sponsors, find people who might be able to fund your voluntary contribution towards the implementation of Habitat 3. So that's a Quito Implementation platform. I only encourage you to go there and to upload your project. That would also give you the possibility to present what you have been doing at the next World Urban Forum, which will be sort of the main next gathering of the United Nations in the world to take stock what has been implemented of the new urban agenda in 1 year. That meeting will take place in about a year in February 2018 in Kuala Lumpur. I hope I'm going to see you before on the implementation of the new urban agenda, but also definitely in Kuala Lumpur in a year's time. Thank you very much.